I know you guys have noticed, Chris Evans is clearly my favorite actor. I like him for his acting. It's his acting. I like his acting. I think he's a good actor. He's a great actor. He's a good actor. It's his acting that I like. I like his acting. Hi everybody, welcome to a year where I torture myself with 32 movies all featuring the same actor. Why not? I just decided that this year I would watch all of Chris Evans' movies because I like him as Captain America and I like him on Twitter. I went through his entire IMDb list and only chose movies, feature-length films that either had a theatrical release or are, I guess, indie films in some way, shape, or form. There are 32 films on this list. That means that I am not doing any films from 2019 on. The only two feature-length films that Chris Evans is technically in, but I'm not going to count for this, are Thor: The Dark World and Ant-Man, and it's because he does not receive a credit on either one. Wish me luck, because I have 32 movies to get through before December. That's my goal. My thought process as far as reviewing each film was that I would give myself a set of standards and I would only stick to those standards. I also asked all of my followers on Twitter and Instagram what kind of arbitrary but funny standards they hold movies to. I'm going to take all of the responses that I got between Instagram and Twitter and put them in a bowl or a hat or whatever and pick one out for each movie. I've actually made a spreadsheet for myself and created a ranking system so that I would know what the public thinks is Chris Evans' best movie and also what I say is the best Chris Evans movie and how that kind of compares. I decided for the Rotten Tomatoes score to take an average of the critic and the audience scores because that just seemed like the fairest way to do that. My numerical score is going to be out of 10, so 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. After talking to my friends about this project, some of them have expressed interest in appearing, or at least watching the movies with me, so even if they don't appear in these, I will still give scores for them. I've put in a guest score little column. Since some movies are clearly not going to have guest scores, instead of taking a sum of the guest scores, if I have more than one guest watching the movie with me, I would take an average. Essentially, the way that I will be ranking the movies is by how many points the movie gets. I have a couple averages. Clearly, there's no average score that I've given a Chris Evans movie because I haven't given any scores, not even to the ones that I've seen yet. I want it to be a pretty fair analysis. So I will give scores to movies as I watch them, not beforehand. The average IMDb score is 6.7 out of 10, and the average Rotten Tomatoes score is 56.98 out of 100. My reviews are going to look like a pros and cons list of each movie, and then a listing of each of these ranks. I want to see what kind of range he's got, I guess. The Newcomers is first, and I will see you at the end of that.
The Newcomers.
Normally when I'm sick, I don't want to film, but I have actually pretty high energy for being quite sick. I didn't want to push reviewing this movie off because I want it to be fresh. It's called The Newcomers and it was released in 2000. It's very much a product of its time, mostly in the costumes. This family lives in Boston and they're not happy for a myriad of reasons. Really, it's only two, but whatever. So they moved to, I think, Vermont because Vermont offers wilderness and corn. The young son is a very good boy, but gets into trouble by way of other children, mostly. The dad has, trouble getting a job, the mom gets a job, and the dad gets upset about it. And then there's a happy ending. The movie was directed by James Allen Bradley. I've never heard of him before. I'm gonna start with the pros. It was free on YouTube. Fat baby Josh Peck is in it. So is Paul Dano from Little Miss Sunshine, except that he's credited as Paul Franklin Dano. The family is really happy. Kate Bosworth doesn't really take shit from the asshole athlete in their Boston school. There's a dog. The dog just goes and gets the mail at one point in the movie without even being asked. Chris showed up. He's tiny, but he's so polite, and he wears a mechanic's jumpsuit the first time you see him. There's a kind old lady who becomes Sam's friend, and the mom in the family doesn't take any misogyny from the people in this small Vermont town. Okay, so that's literally all of the pros that I have. There are way more cons for this movie because it's not very good. The very, very long intro is distracting and the music is the same throughout the movie. They also spelled photography and director of photography with an IE instead of a Y. Kate Bosworth's dialogue, not good. The costumes are basic as hell. There's an athlete that is like the embodiment of toxic masculinity. Also, his accent is very distracting.
Guess you must have heard about my full football scholarship to BC.
Apparently having a football scholarship is a testament of character, and that's why like the administrators at the school don't believe that he would do anything as terrible as stealing a computer from his own school and then attempting to harm a small child who catches him stealing the computer. The bully chases the child and attempts to murder him with his car. There's PowerPoint swipe transitions, because apparently this is a Star Wars movie too. Poorly raised Vermont children who are scared of dogs. Too many voiceovers. And it's all like stuff that has been said before in the movie that the movie doesn't want you to forget that they said.
Let's go somewhere where we can really live.
Where, Gary?
I don't know, anywhere. Let's go somewhere where we can really live.
Where, Gary?
I don't know, anywhere.
The dog gets injured and also disappears. There's fat jokes. Also casual racism. Played off as like child playtime, but very obvious racism. There's not nearly enough Chris Evans. He's in it for maybe like 5 minutes out of, I want to say like an hour and a half to 2 hours. So now on to my ranking system. I pulled my arbitrary ranking out of a little container that I have. The ranking is how attractive is the cast. I was really hoping that I would get this for something like Fantastic Four, but I got it for this. Other than Kate Bosworth and Chris Evans and the dog, not very attractive. The IMDb score was 5 out of 10. The Rotten Tomatoes score was 32. My score is a 4 out of 10 because the characters were all bland and boring. And the only time that I had like a visceral reaction to this movie was when the dog was on screen or when Chris was on screen. The total score for this movie is 41 points. Right now the total score with only one movie having been watched is 1,978.4 out of a possible 4,160. So we're starting okay. That was The Newcomers. See you soon. So I am currently waiting to watch Not Another Teen Movie, which actually comes between The Newcomers and The Perfect Score because I'm watching it with friends and we all just need to coordinate essentially. So the scores are going to be a little out of order. Friends, you would never believe it, but I paid to watch The Perfect Score. I tried to watch it for free online and it just wasn't working out. It would have taken me like twice as long to watch it, so I sucked it up and paid the $2.99 to rent it from Google. The Perfect Score was made in 2004 and it was directed by Brian Robbins, another director that I've never heard of and don't think I've ever seen anything else by him. The Perfect Score is about 6 teenagers that decide that for whatever reason they can't retake the SAT, and so they break into a government building and steal the answers. Because, you know, cheating their way into college isn't ironic or anything. You know what? I found that there were just as many pros this time as there are cons, so that's hopefully a good thing. Chris's character is the first one that you see on screen, and he's a baby, and I love him. There were captions this time. Chris's lips. I don't want to get weird. I just really liked them. To be fair to me, there were certain points in this movie where I had written nothing for a good 15 minutes because I just had no thoughts whatsoever. Matthew Lillard is Chris's brother. Kyle, Chris's character, doesn't want to steal. Recognizes that that's illegal and not a good thing to do. There actually was some smart insight into the criticism of standardized testing. The black character mentions that it's racist, and one of the two girl characters mentions that it's sexist in her own way. It's not the worst cinematography that I've seen, especially compared to The Newcomers, which was nothing special. The smartest girl in school, her parents talk for her, they talk over her. She's very insecure about that, and I immediately took a liking to her. The dialogue in this isn't awful. Francesca is played by Scarlett Johansson, and her fantasy as far as breaking into this government building that her father owns is basically Natasha Romanoff's reality. There was a Foo Fighters song in it. I can't tell you which one it is. I only liked Anna, the smartest girl in school, and Kyle, Chris Evans' character. At least consistently, anyway. So they break into the building, and in order to get the answers to the test, they all just decide that they're going to take different sections of it because they can't actually get access to print the answers. So they take the test together. Teamwork. There's a Moody Simple Plan song because it's, 2004. There really weren't that many gay jokes, especially compared to other early 2000s movies. And there were especially no fat jokes that I appreciated that. There were no fat characters. Actually, I've got two that are in the middle. I couldn't decide if they were good or bad. One is that it's an MTV movie, and the other one is that Kyle wants to be an architect. I called it immediately, because that's what all men in film want to be, apparently. Going into the cons now. The credits were on Scantrons. I hated the narrator, right off the bat. Chris's character's name is Kyle. They literally had a transition over Chris Evans' face that was the equations meme. Kyle doesn't apply anywhere but Cornell. His only option is Cornell. If you're an average student, you can have goals and dreams and that's fine, but maybe have at least one backup state or community college, just in case. A big problem that I had with this movie was that none of them were willing to go to community or state college, and the thing about transferring later is that if you transfer after already having gone through 1 or 2 years of school, the schools that you're transferring to don't give a shit about SAT scores. Maddie considers breaking up with his girlfriend because he doesn't get into the school that she's currently going to. The very first time you see Scarlett Johansson, she's wearing butterfly clips. "The SAT is pimping out my girlfriend," says Maddie unnecessarily. When they actually introduce Scarlett Johansson's character, the first shot of her that you get is a shot of her cherry panties. Why, MTV? Roy is the Asian character. He's kind of terrible. I don't know why he's the one that's the narrator, and I also don't really know why he was in the movie at all. Larry, otherwise known as Matthew Lillard, is also very useless. The only time that they give him any kind of usefulness at all is when he's giving Kyle a pep talk, and that's it. At the very end of the movie, Francesca goes without a bra, and then she tells Anna that she looks like a slut, as if that's a compliment. So those are the pros and cons of The Perfect Score. It's not a great movie. It's not a movie that I would have on DVD, not even for Chris Evans. The arbitrary ranking that I pulled out of my little container is the success of the narration, which I'm gonna guess I made up because there's no, credit on it. The narration did not need to be there. It was a complete staple of the genre that it's in, and it's useless. Entirely useless. The IMDb score for The Perfect Score is 5.7 out of 10. The Rotten Tomatoes score is 29.5 out of 100. My score was a 5, and I only gave it a 5 because I gave The Newcomers a 4, and I liked it more than The Newcomers. Chris played the main character in this one. At the very least. It's much more interesting to look at as a whole than The Newcomers was. The total score for The Perfect Score is 40.2. It actually comes in under The Newcomers. So the average scores for just The Newcomers and The Perfect Score, it's a 4.5, which is fair so far. That's out of 10. And the total score from every Rotten Tomatoes, every IMDb, and my two scores so far is 1,983.4 out of a possible 4,160. Hopefully I'll be watching Not Another Teen Movie next, but if I don't, the one immediately after The Perfect Score is called Cellular, and I know for a fact that that one, at the very moment, is available on Netflix. I'll be back for more Chris Evans viewing.